and it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham-Forest incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer, really, standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Please remember to visit the website podcastufo.com for past episodes, blogs, and forums. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host. And Alejandro Rojas will be coming up in just a minute. We have a couple of guests this evening. One is Norio Hayawaka. After that, we have Simon Sharman is going to be joining us from the UK. It's going to be the middle of the night for him. And a couple of things. If you haven't listened in a while, Joyride is gone. We have a new support platform. Everything can be found right on our website. Under the menu bar says support the show. I want to thank all of those out there that are helping out and supporting. It's a lot of you haven't heard. A lot of people are emailing saying what's going on because you probably don't listen to every single show, and I totally understand that. But everything's right on our website. We have Susan is coming up from the New England UFO conference after the news to give a brief hello and talk about that. I'm going to be there. That's in Leominster, Massachusetts this coming weekend, and hopefully we'll be able to catch up with some listeners there. As usual, we usually get to hang out with a few of us there. We have T-shirt graphics. There's at least 7 or 8 people are throwing their design in. We're going to have a vote, and that will be on November 4th. That'll be up on our website. We'll have all the different designs, and we'll let you, the listener, vote for the T-shirt graphics. And there'll be more details on that as soon as we get closer to that. And that's enough of my babble. We have Alejandro Rojas. How are you?
Good. Will I be able to vote on the design?
Oh, absolutely.
Awesome. I think it'd be cool if you had a Norio Hayakawa T-shirt.
Oh, yes, with that Japanese flag in the background.
Well, it'd be cool, you know, him playing his guitar with his cowboy hat. And
yeah, we'll have to talk to him
he's
about that.
He's a unique individual. I love Norio.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll have to get his permission, of course.
Of course.
I'm sure he'll be all over it.
He'll love it.
Yeah. So what's going on in the UFO news this week?
UFO news. Lots of exciting stuff. Not really. Actually, it's kind of boring when it comes to news this week. And it makes me want, you know, we talk about this. There's all those people out there who hype up and over-sensationalize everything. There's this one guy I know whose name I will not disclose who can make some weird rock being found in Russia sound like this amazing alien event and phenomena going on. But for those of us who like to be more straight up on the news and information, it gets a little harder when there's not as exciting stuff, and we don't want to, you know, boast these things as something they are not. But but there are a few sightings. You didn't want to say anything about that? Like, oh, yeah, those people bug me too?
Well, you know, you have to let things run their course, I guess.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, I guess you're right. So Pennsylvania witness videotapes a boomerang UFO. Sounds like it could be exciting. The video is not that exciting. You can't really make much out. A lot of people are saying, oh, that's probably Venus. But it's difficult to make anything out. The witness did say they saw a black helicopter during the day, probably not related. But at night when they went out to have a smoke, they saw this light that they said just suddenly appeared. They took a picture that's in the story, and he says after it floated and hovered around for a minute from left to right, it ascended a little and then quickly vanished, flew off. So if it really flew off, of course, that would be something significant.
Right, yeah. How many witnesses were there total on this?
Only the one witness submitted it, but he said that it was him and his fiancée.
Not a mass sighting, but still interesting. Yeah.
And he has a photo, although you can't make much out in the photo. Another video where that includes, a UFO sighting that includes some photos that are also as difficult to make out. In fact, if you just look at the photos, you would think it's probably Venus. And I suppose it could be. They said they first spotted this thing around 5:30. That's when they really watched it and took some pictures. 5:30 a.m., that is. They believe that it first appeared in the sky around 3:30, and this is the key. They say they see it in the sky almost every morning between 3:30 and 4:30, and it fades as it gets brighter out. So, yeah, most likely a star, most likely Venus there, although they think that, at least in these pictures they took, that the object is below the cloud cover. However, although there are clouds, in none of these pictures do the clouds seem to cover the object. So that one's still outstanding. They said that they do feel that it may have moved, but probably Venus. And then here's the other one that I have for you. This is brilliant red-orange, and of course that always raises a red flag right there. UFOs reported moving over Scranton, Pennsylvania.
You're talking about Chinese lantern thoughts? Is that what you're...
Chinese lantern thoughts, because Chinese lanterns are usually red-orange orbs, and that's what this witness said they had seen at 9:15 p.m. on September 22nd. He said they were flying in different formations. However, the person said that the four objects, there were four of them, emerged together and shot off behind the clouds to the west. So, of course, if they moved at a fast speed and just didn't appear to move at a fast speed, then that would rule out Chinese lanterns. But, of course, often these orange red orbs turn out to be just that. So another one. There were no photos that were captured or video on this one, but another, just interesting report from the MUFON database.
Now, that Terry Ray and Erica Lukes, I think a few people are getting together and they're doing the orange orb research through MUFON, or they were going to. I'm not sure if that's still on or if that's still happening. But I read this story in particular, and if I remember right, it said that a fifth orb joins, it comes from a different location and joins up with the rest of them. That sounds pretty peculiar.
He said he just saw a fifth one appear, but only the four that were together earlier seemed to merge.
Ah, okay.
But of course, if they were launched together and as they got further away, it's not too hard to think that they may look weird. I think the issue is, and I think this is where some investigators go off the rails a bit, where they just don't get it. I think that we always have to think of how, with these stories or sightings, if we're going to purport that they are something significant, they have to do something unusual, some unusual characteristics. If you can't say those characteristics are not something a balloon or a lantern can do, then there's not really much we can do with that except for say it's interesting. And a lot of these researchers are trying to say, well, not all the orange orbs are Chinese lanterns. Maybe not, but if you don't have, you're not documenting them doing something really strange, then you can't prove otherwise. Yeah. And that's the high bar we have for this field. But as Mr. Sagan said, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
That's right. And it's Occam's razor when it comes to this type of thing as well. You know that Carl Sagan wasn't the first person to say that. There was.
Oh, he wasn't.
No, I had looked that up at one time. It was someone else prior to Sagan, and he kind of, he's known for saying it. But if you Google that, you can check that out. I'm pretty sure. I could be totally wrong.
What we should do, we should look it up and make sure and credit the original source to popularize, the guy who deserves the credit, assuming it was a man.
All right, so check out the show notes. If I get some time here, I'll check that out, and I'll pop that into the show notes.
Sounds good, brother.
And all these links will be there, which will go to Open Minds TV and our good friend over there, Alejandro Rojas.
Yep, and I can't say there is more interesting news coming. So there are some stories I know coming down the pipe that are going to be really interesting. So next week we should have some more fun stuff to talk about.
Yeah, there's talk about George Bush Sr.
No, that's not interesting. That's a hoax.
Is that a hoax? I've been trying to figure out if that's a hoax or not. So you have
the original source was World Weekly News, which it even says on the site it's an entertainment purposes only. If you look at the stories, it's like The Onion. They're just kind of making up some stories.
Well, I'm glad you looked into that. I tried to figure out something the day after I heard it. I couldn't find anything. So when I couldn't find a lot on it, that made me nervous that it could be somewhat the hoax. But very good. Well, thanks so much, and thanks for clearing that up, too. And we'll be talking to you next week.
All right. Talk to you soon, buddy.
All right. Hang in, everyone. We're going to have Susan talk about the New England UFO conference that I will be attending this weekend. All right. So now we're speaking with Susan McNeil Spooler about the Greater New England UFO Conference coming up this weekend. How are you, Susan?
I am well. Thank you for having me.
Sure. And on our website also is the banner where you can click on that on Podcast UFO. You'll see the banner in the sidebar, and you can click on that and get all the information. But, Susan, let's talk about the conference. This is a little different than last year in a couple of different ways.
Well, this is the third annual, and in the past 2 years, Steve Fermani from Leominster ran the conference. I volunteered for him. I ran the registration desk, and that gave me a lot of insight as to what's required to run such an event. So I'm implementing those changes to make it more efficient.
And one of them is the price. It's a very reasonable price this year.
It is. I'm personally funding this event myself, and I have done a great deal of advertising, real television commercials on the History Channel, National Geographic, Sci-Fi, throughout north central Massachusetts.
All right, let's talk about the speakers who's going to be there this year.
Sure. We have Mark D'Antonio, who is an expert. He works for MUFON, and he is an expert in video and audio. Photographs to determine whether or not they're authentic or whatever they are.
It's one of my favorite people.
He's fantastic. We have Ray Hernandez. He's coming up from Miami Beach, Florida, and he is the co-director and co-founder of FREE, which is the Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters. He's been collecting data from people around the world, over several thousand people, from the United States, China, North America, South America, and in various languages to make a comparative analysis of people's abduction experiences. If the aliens look the same, what happens to them, etc. So he'll be divulging for the first time the data that he has gleaned from these.
He was a guest on the show not too long ago, but at that time he was not divulging the data, so that's good to know.
Right. So that's a special thing that's going to be happening this Saturday. Then we will have Roxy Zwicker from Portsmouth, New Hampshire. She's a historian, and she does haunted historical tours, and also has had experiences with orbs and UFO sightings. So she'll be speaking for us, as well as Bill Hall. And he wrote a book called The Haunted House Diaries, and it has to do with the paranormal flap in Litchfield County, Connecticut. Very interesting book. And then after that, we're having Paul and Ben Eno. They're the world-famous father and son paranormal team. Their talk will be Alien versus Demon, which is which. Very interesting people.
Yes.
And let's see. Our keynote speaker, Richard Dolan, will speak at 3 p.m. Some scheduling guffaws. He'll be doing his presentation via Skype from London. We're all set technically to accommodate that. And after that, we are having Jan Harzan. Jan is the Executive Director of MUFON. MUFON stands for the Mutual UFO Network. And he'll be talking about the past 46 years of MUFON's history and moving forward what they plan to do. Now, Friday, going a little bit backwards here, we're having Billy Penning and Ronnie LeBlanc, who are from Leominster. They will talk about Bigfoot experiences, orange orbs, and they have a plaster cast of a foot, a Bigfoot foot that they took in Leominster State Forest. So Leominster is a real hotbed of UFO and very unusual activities. And Bill Brock will also be speaking. He's coming down from Maine as well to talk about Bigfoot.
Oh, we should commute.
Should.
Yeah.
$25 for adults and $10 for children under 12 on Saturday. Friday, $10 for adults and $5 for children under 12. We look forward to seeing you. Our website is www.newenglandufo.com.
Very good. Thanks so much, and I look forward to seeing you this weekend.
Thank you as well. Take care.
So hang in, everyone, for this quick music break. We'll be right back with Norio. Norio Hayakawa, how are you? I pronounced your name wrong, didn't I?
You sure did, but no problem. A lot of people do.
I'm sorry about that.
My last name is Hayakawa.
Hayakawa.
Which means, in Japanese, which means fast river.
Really?
Haya means fast, and kawa means river. So it has a meaning.
Well, I want to welcome you to the show. You're only on for about a half an hour or so. I have read a lot of your postings over the last few years, and I think you have a pretty good view on what's going on. It's always interesting to read what you write, and you sort of have a good, healthy skepticism as well.
That's correct.
And so, can you talk about you have an interesting background too. Can you tell the listening audience who's not aware of your background? And you live in New Mexico, right?
That's correct. I live in the city of Rio Rancho, which is right next to Albuquerque, and I'm really glad to be living here in this land of enchantment. I used to live in California, but in 2008, we moved here to this amazing state of New Mexico.
Well, I've spent a little time there myself, actually, in visiting with my sister 4 months in Los Alamos, and I love the whole area. Santa Fe, it's just a gorgeous canyons, wonderful hiking if you're into that, and really nice Native American culture. I really like that.
Exactly, and actually, New Mexico is the reason why I have been involved in the UFOs for the past 55 years, or I don't know, maybe close to 60 years, because I started active UFO research in 1961 while I was living in Japan, but it was in 1964 that I became acquainted with the Lonnie Zamora Socorro incident in New Mexico in 1964, and that's really what brought me to New Mexico.
Really?
That's
wow.
Correct.
That is, to me, I think that's one of the top cases. He was Lonnie was by everyone. Ray Stanford, I've talked to a number of times, and a lot of people that all say the same thing. He was a stand-up guy. He didn't want any publicity, especially this type of publicity. And, he was telling the truth.
That's correct. And the reason I like New Mexico is because it has, first of all, it's so spacious. I mean, it's the 5th largest state in the Union with just a population of just 2 million in the entire state. And this is why I have always stated that it's a perfect location for the government to conduct any kind of black project programs or research using this amazingly vast area. And I have to tell you that I have a website, my own website now. It's called noriohayakawa.wordpress.com, in which I post lots of fascinating items, and many of the items refer to New Mexico, and especially if you scroll down my website, you can see things such as the amazing Farmington, New Mexico sighting of 1950, in which the incident took place for 3 days in a row, every time around 11 to noon, and hundreds of objects were seen in formation by hundreds of citizens of Farmington, and you can see about that incident in my website. But anyway, I'm so excited today, especially right now, because this coming Saturday I have helped organize the second New Mexico UFO conference. It's going to take place on October 17th, this Saturday. And the mayor of Rio Rancho, where I reside, officially declared October 17th as the official UFO Research Day. And it's the first time that I recall that an American city's mayor has declared in seriousness the significance of UFO research. And so we're very excited. And this conference is being sponsored by nonprofit New Mexico MUFON. And we are bringing in 3 speakers, Colonel John Alexander, Nick Pope, and Nick Redfern. They are the only 3 speakers, and it's going to be a tremendous conference based on serious research. And so, by the mayor of Rio Rancho declaring October 17th as the official UFO Research Day, it is a recognition that this is not about craziness of Roswell Festival and all that. There's nothing of that sort in this conference. The mayor has declared that UFO research is a serious research. And we're not talking about aliens and all kinds of costumes and all that stuff. We're straightforwardly talking about the seriousness of the UFO phenomena and reality. But yet, we have not come to any conclusion as to what this phenomenon really is. And so the title of that conference on Saturday here in Rio Rancho is, What Does the Government Really Know? And so, anyway, I'm so excited. I have to mention that.
Well, that is a stellar lineup you have there.
I believe so.
Yeah, and John was on this show, I think 2 weeks ago, and he will definitely have something to say about the government and UFOs for sure. He's not always popular with a lot of the listening audience. I had a number of emails of people I actually forwarded a few to him. He got a kick out of it, of people calling him a disinformation agent because of, he's basically claims that it's nothing that, the government is really that interested in compared to wars and everything else that's going on at the same time. So anyway, again, not always popular, but I think he has a good message. I really enjoyed speaking with him. Very smart guy. And also Nick Pope is kind of hard to nail down. So, and Redford's, really, I'm a fan of Nick Redford, and he always has a lot. And that guy can put out some books, let me tell you.
Yes, he's a prolific author, and he has a whole range of topics in this so-called ufology. Probably he's the most prolific authors today regarding ufology and the various aspects of ufology and UFO culture. And by the way, I don't call myself a ufologist. I call myself an unorthodox ufologist that specializes in the culture of ufology, the culture. So I have not, in fact, there's no such a thing as a UFO expert. A lot of people use the term UFO expert, such as, a UFO expert is coming to a conference and going to speak. There's no such a thing as a UFO expert, because it's like saying that he or she is an expert on God.
Yeah.
That's my statement.
Well, I totally am in line with that. I was in Russia a few weeks ago visiting over there, and I just had this situation happen. Someone introduced me to this person at a spa and said a few things about me, and the guy was very excited and was babbling on, and I was introduced as an alien expert by someone over there. I thought that was. I said no. I tried to get the translation changed a little bit for that. Just saying that I do a show, and a lot of people actually say to me, "Are you a ufologist?" And I'm not. Maybe an armchair one at best, but I am just fascinated by the topic. I had my own sighting. I became fascinated with the topic and fascinated with the people involved in this field. And, there is some, there's a little bit of infighting here and there. There's some of that goes on no matter what. But I think the people that are interested in this topic are fascinating.
You're absolutely right, because as far as I'm concerned, there's no topic more important in our life than the topic of the UFO phenomenon, because anybody that can solve the UFO phenomenon will solve the entire mysteries of the universe. And so from psychologically, sociologically, culturally, and scientifically, the UFO phenomenon question will answer a lot of questions, but so far it hasn't brought anything. But I think that this topic relates to everything. This topic relates to everything. So I say that the UFO phenomenon topic is one of the most important because it involves all types of beliefs, and beliefs are definitely part of the human psyche. Everybody has a belief, but sometimes belief can lead to reality. Sometimes it doesn't. So anyway, I continue to keep abreast with what is happening in the world as far as UFO reports and theories and everything is concerned. Like I said, I've been doing this since 1961, but I can definitely state that I am just as ignorant as anybody about this subject. I have not come to any conclusion because it's a remaining mystery. Mm-hmm. And so I continue to gather information. We have actually not come any step closer to the truth than we started.
I believe that 100%. And I've had a few people ask me, well, why do you do this? Are you looking to see this thing solved? Is that why you're in it? And I just say, well, it's probably not going to happen in my lifetime, and I'm okay with that. I really am. I am totally okay with that. And it's not because if it was solved, my show would go away, because that probably would happen. I've never really thought about that. But just the fact that it is such a mystery. And, anytime that someone is out there and telling you they know what's going on, that's when you want to run the other way. Because no one really knows.
That's true. And here is a very important thing. There are two concepts or two thoughts that everybody has. And that is that in this whole wide cosmos or universe, there has to be some type of intelligence or intelligent entities somewhere in this universe. Most mainline astronomers, scientists, and so on believe that, yes, the possibility is there, definitely. There has to be. But the second idea is that then the UFO phenomenon is relevant to that, or is the UFO phenomenon an evidence of such an extraterrestrial visitation, physical visitation here to our physical Earth? This is two completely different subjects. And most scientists and astronomers of the world are, while the majority believe that there has to be somewhere in this universe other intelligent life. But when it comes to UFOs, it's a totally different story. And I have to stress the difference, and it's very important. So basically what I'm trying to say is that the UFO phenomenon is not equivalent to evidence for extraterrestrial physical visitation. And this is also what Dr. Jacques Vallée has been saying. In fact, people like Dr. Jacques Vallée, people like John A. Keel, the late John A. Keel, a prolific author, just like Nick Redfern of today. But both these gentlemen are my heroes, Dr. Jacques Vallée and John A. Keel. And both have really changed my view of UFO phenomenon since around 1978 when I started reading their books. And so what I'm trying to say is that let's not equate the UFO phenomenon with physical extraterrestrial visitations. We still haven't come up with conclusive evidence for this. But let's keep researching about this phenomena. The phenomena definitely seems to be real or real, although we don't really know what real is. In fact, that's another saying of mine. We still don't know what reality really is.
That's right. Even that the science will prove that, actually. Especially when you get into like quantum mechanics and all that. I just want to make a quick announcement here. Anyone listening live, you can jump over to podcastufo.com and get in our chat room. You can also call in live if you'd like to. That's 603-967-4030. Or Skype, Marty Willis. That's MartyWillis. I don't know why I chose that. I don't like to be called Marty, but anyway. But next week, I just wanted to make this announcement. I'm going to say it at the end, too. We have, I think, a really killer show lined up. We have, first, we're going to start out with Mark Rudiger and Leslie Kane. They're going to be on first. And then after that, we have skeptic Michael Shermer. You all know him from his smirk that he does so famously when he's talking about the UFO phenomena. So anyway, that's going to be a really great show next week coming up. And again, if we want to jump in the chat room, we do have a question up there now for you, Norio, and that is, what have you learned about the UFO culture? And this person would like to know more about that because that's what interests you the most.
Yes, a very good question. And the UFO culture has a wide spectrum. Let's say, for example, one of the best example of UFO culture in America and also in the world is, let's take, for example, Area 51. Now, Area 51 has become synonymous with alien technology. And that's what I mean. Somehow or other, in 1989, when the world first started hearing about Area 51 due to the appearance of Mr. Bob Lazar in 1981 on Las Vegas Channel 13 News, the world has equated or ascribed Area 51 with alien technology. And that's what I call UFO cultures. It's a household word. Area 51 has become America's household word, and everybody associates Area 51 with aliens. And another interesting thing about the culture of UFOs is, of course, the gray alien and the Roswell. Roswell has become synonymous with alien spaceship crash. And this has deeply become part of UFO culture. In fact, the city of Roswell, New Mexico, has benefited from the people's association of Roswell with aliens. And this is what I mean. In this world, there's a UFO culture that actually is contributing to part of the UFO industry. What I call the UFO industry includes movies, videos, books,
podcasts,
everything.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that the UFO industry is bad or good. It's just part of the culture. So we have to admit that there is a UFO culture here, and it just developed naturally. And until we really encounter the final truth, in other words, let's say the arrival of real extraterrestrial physical entities on Earth, the UFO culture will continue on and on.
Now, a lot of the cultures in the past have, faded away with time, like fairies, angels, things like that. And you hear speculation that the UFO, this is from skeptics or, I don't know, maybe debunkers, skeptics, whatever you want to call them, that say it's just another trend, like the little people, the leprechauns, and all that. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, I think it's here to stay until something's solved myself, but, maybe I'm just blind to that topic.
Yes, we're living in this modern century, and the people's concept of extraterrestrials have become, streamlined extraterrestrial flying saucer, type of shape, and it fits the modern civilization. But in the Middle Ages, their description of reported sightings were different, like fire or round halo-like objects. And when it comes to entities, fairies, elves, and so on, were reported and recorded throughout history. But like Dr. Jacques Vallée said, each culture, each age has its own description of something we still don't know. And so, it's a fascinating thing that this phenomenon has existed for ages, according to researchers like Dr. Jacques Vallée, and yet we are still completely mystified about this phenomenon.
Up on the message board, someone wants to know what your thoughts on Dulce is.
Yes, that's a very good topic. Since I live in New Mexico, I live only about 2.5 hours away from Dulce, and I visit Dulce once in a while and talk to the locals. Yes, there definitely seems to be something there, but we don't really know what that is because we haven't come up with any physical, tangible, solid evidence that there is a physical underground facility in or around Dulce, New Mexico, including the so-called Archuleta Mesa, as well as the Archuleta Mountain, which is located northwest on the mesa, right near Colorado border. But the rumors continue on, but my take is that there is a possibility that at one point in time...
Hold on just 1 second, if you would, yes. Please. Okay, caller, please say your first name. And sorry to interrupt you, Norio. Caller, you have a question?
Hi, yeah, I apologize for the interruption as well. This is Chris in Pennsylvania. I'm just wondering if you think the same UFO cultures are developing in South America around sites where UFOs are seen often. And I'll take my answer off the air. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, a very good question. Yes, there's a UFO culture in South America. And to give you an example, there's a place called Uritorco in Argentina, near the city of, not too far away from the city of Cordoba, Argentina. And Uritorco is a town just like Sedona, Arizona, which has become a spot for people who are into the mysterious aspect of this UFO phenomenon, because a lot of people in that location, Uritorco, believe that there is some kind of a vortex in that location, just like Sedona. And that's why I'm saying that this is not unique. The UFO cultural spot, I would say, exists around the world. I just mentioned to you Sedona, for example, Arizona. It's a mecca for those who are really into the mystery, or some people even call the myth. But yes, I believe that this is part of UFO culture.
Norio, I know you wanted to be on for a short time, but I feel like we got a lot to talk about. And what I'd like to do, I've had a couple of weeks, I've had a couple of problems with getting guests. So what I'd like for you to do, if it's all right with you, is to hang on while I add the next guest to the conversation. And if he is not answering, then I'll have you to fall back on. How's that?
Well, unfortunately, yes. I have to leave right now, but definitely I would like to get on your program in the very near future, longer than today.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, I'm going to try the next guest, and thanks so much, Norio. I really appreciate it. It was great talking to you, and yes, we will definitely have you back on.
Thank you so much, Martin.
All right, you take care.
Bye.
All right, hang in, everyone. We're trying our next guest here. Simon.
Hey, Martin, how you doing?
Can you believe that? We got you on. The last couple of weeks I've had some trouble with connecting with guests, so this worked as smooth as can be. Welcome to the show, Simon.
Thanks very much, Martin. It's great to be here.
Well, I don't know how great it is. What time is it in the morning there?
It's exactly 6:47 a.m. So,
oh, yes.
Yeah.
And you told me today that you have to get up early. I feel for you. I really appreciate you coming on the show. Now, last time you were on the show, I don't know if I ever told you this, but your show got a lot of downloads. You have a lot of people are paying attention to you and what you do. Can you give the listener that did not hear your show the first time, which was a few years ago, basically your background and what got you interested in the topic, and then we'll talk about your movie?
Yeah, sure. I've got to think now, cast my mind back about 20 years. It was around 1989 or 1990. I actually heard Timothy Good on the radio, and it was a late-night show, and he was talking about a lot of the stuff that, a lot of us are aware of now, whether it was, certain people disclosing information, military witness accounts, etc. But this was before the days of the internet, and it was certainly before the days of the X-Files. And to hear somebody speak in such a manner about this subject in such detail, it had an effect on me. It did have a big impact, and it was at that point when I thought I really needed to take a look at the subject because it really took me by surprise. And I spent that summer trying to find every book I could find on the UFO topic, which, I've got to be honest with you, Martin, wasn't very many books back in those days. I think it was about 7 or 8 books in my local library. And that's where it all began.
Uh-huh. And I remember, I think I remember you saying that basically your area where you live in, there's a lot of cloud cover. Am I getting that right?
You're absolutely correct. Yes, it's generally grey clouds. The north of England is, and especially being on one particular side of the Pennines, means that the weather pattern where we are gives it basically doesn't give any clear skies very often. Although recently it's been a lot better. But yeah, generally my memory of growing up is a lot of rain walking to school. So yeah.
Now, how far? Just because I don't know where this is, where's Warminster from you? How far away is that?
I couldn't tell you exactly how many miles, but it's probably around 200.
Oh, okay. So it's not really that far away, and that was as far as I know, it's still an ongoing hotspot, or has been.
Apparently so. I've got to be honest, Martin, it's not something I'm particularly familiar with, so it's not something I could really comment on with any authority. But so I believe. There does seem to be things going on down there, but I'm not familiar with the case or the cases.
Now, going back to Timothy Good, he was on the show briefly. I got to meet him, 2 years ago down in North Carolina. Real nice guy, smart. He's a concert violinist. But he comes under a lot of controversy these days. Some of the books he's written, and very popular. Another one who a lot of people follow and listen to everything he says. But He's gotten in a little bit of controversy, nothing that he's done deliberately, just some of the topics he's spoken on. And I don't know where I'm going with this exactly, but I really enjoyed meeting him. Seemed like a really nice guy. Have you actually sat and talked with him?
Yeah, I've met him a few times. In fact, the last time he was at a UFO conference in Yorkshire about 2 years ago, and we met the evening before. We had dinner and quite a lengthy conversation. So it's funny you should say that, though. I mean, first of all, can I just say I have an huge amount of time for Tim. As you say, particularly lovely man. A very gentle man and a gentleman in the old sense of the word. But yes, in terms of his more recent work and his more recent books, I mean, I have to say he has gone a bit more controversial. Now, I did say this to him on the night we met, actually, the last time we saw each other. I did say that, it did seem he was becoming more out there, more out on a limb with his views or the cases he was looking at. And it's funny, his reaction. He had this kind of wry smile about him, and he basically said, I can't remember his exact words, but he was making the point that, this is a controversial subject, and it seems to me that I think the longer you're in it, the longer you're involved in it, it's a risk, I think, for some people, and maybe a danger. Like I say, I've got a huge amount of time for Tim. I'm not quite so sure where he's going with some of the material in his latest books. I mean, for me, Above Top Secret, we all know a massive bestseller in it, a hugely important piece of work for the topic of UFOs and for a lot of people around the world. I think Tim probably introduced a lot of people to the subject back in the late 80s. But yeah, where he's going in the last couple of years, I'm just interested to see where it goes, really.
Yeah, right. That book that you just mentioned, Above Top Secret, that I've always heard a lot of good about. I don't have the book myself, but I've heard it's a very good book. And so getting back, we have you for the whole next hour too. But I wanted to just talk about what was the genesis of this documentary that you recently put together and the name of it.
Yeah, the film's called Cosmic Whistleblowers, and it all began when Jesse Marcel Jr. came to the UK. Crikey, it was around 4 or 5 years ago now, maybe 2007, 2008. It could be. No, it'd be later than that, actually, maybe 2009. I'm not sure of the year. But that's where I first met with Don Schmidt, who was also on the trip, and I think he was promoting his last book at the time, which would have been Witness to Roswell. And we began a conversation there, and that's where the idea began. Don told me, I think even back then, that he was still getting new witnesses to the case, and he was getting new witnesses all of the time. So it all began there, really. We re-established contact maybe a year or two later, and that's where discussions began about maybe looking at doing something and getting some interviews on camera.
Mm-hmm. And so you did a lot of traveling. First of all, is the movie in the can? Is it done?
Yes, I am pleased to say more than 2 years later, Cosmic Whistleblowers got wrapped in the summer of this year. We finished shooting in Mexico City and in Washington, D.C. And we successfully were chosen for the Raindance Film Festival this year in London. And the film actually had its world premiere in the West End in London in the View Piccadilly Cinema, and a 200-seater cinema in September. And audience seemed to genuinely love the film, which obviously is every filmmaker's dream, really. That's all you can hope for, that it's well received, because it was a huge task to make this happen. I've got to be honest with you, Martin.
I'm sure a lot of people have no idea what's involved in something like this. I know everything starts with an idea. That's what they say first, and from there, there's the storyboarding. There's more or less a screenplay, even though it's a documentary. So a lot of times something like this, is not really a money maker. You know, people say a lot of times, you know, the UFO documentaries do not make any money, or most documentaries do not make any money. But yet, you have to have a passion for it. Is that basically what got you going and kept you going?
Absolutely correct, and I couldn't have put it better myself. Really, it has to be something that, in fact, I could put it this way. A friend of mine recently, you know, asked me the same kind of question. You know, why did you make the film? And the answer came to me. It wasn't really a film that I wanted to make, but it was more a film I had to make. At the time, Don said he had New Witnesses, which was the hook to the entire idea. I think it was maybe Nick Pope and a couple of other people. I was reading even a couple of years ago that they were putting this idea over that the Roswell case was dead, and why were people bothering with it? For me, I had the other idea that maybe, you know, if there were some witnesses that were still alive, which of course there are, but very few of them, then it seemed to me that we should probably speak to them at least one more time, put them on the record, and go from there.
And did you actually speak with some of these witnesses?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, we met with some of them in Roswell itself. A couple of them have been on camera before. People you'll know, names you'll know, like Frankie Rowe, for example. And Arthur Ossipchuk, actually, who now lives out in Mobile, Alabama. He was part of the 509th Wing Command Group and actually on the plane that flew the wreckage out of Roswell in 1947. So I actually met with him as well. But we also had a couple of new second-hand witnesses, shall we call them. So people who were giving testimony from first-hand witnesses, but accounts which we'd not heard before, and angles that we'd not heard before as well. So we did have some new witnesses. They weren't direct witnesses, I wouldn't say that, but certainly direct connections to the case, family members, sons, son-in-laws, etc., that were giving, you know, testimony from the people who were there on the actual day. So, you know, we had a real nice mix of first-hand witnesses and some new names that were connected to the case. But that, I mean, I've got to say, I'm sure we'll cover it as time goes on, Martin, if you've got more questions, but that was kind of just the beginning of the film, really. What began as a fairly modest notion of just getting some of these interviews on camera, because things in documentary, the thing with documentary, Martin, is, as I'm sure you may know, that things don't always go to plan. It's not like shooting a feature. You don't quite know what's going to happen. And on the first day that we landed in Albuquerque, my first interview actually pulled out at the very last minute. Gave us a massive problem. I wasn't quite sure what to do, so we started rolling the cameras without having an interview to do, and it kind of set a precedent for how the film would take shape, and that's where it all started.
So by accident, you started a precedent.
Yeah, because we didn't know what was around the corner. The next day when we landed in Roswell, we had more people kind of potentially pulling out. There were some difficulties with some of the witnesses that Don had set up or tried to set up for us. So things, you know, didn't always go as we hoped they would, and it started happening pretty early on in the process. So yeah, but you know, that's documentary filmmaking. That's the business. You know, it's our job, or my job, just to film things as they unfold, and you know, you can't always predict what's going to happen.
Right. Now, okay, so the living witnesses, they're all like in their 90s or pretty close to their 90s at this point. Did you actually interview anyone that was a direct witness, or were they all the second-hand witness?
No, I would say direct. I mean, it depends on how you grade these people, I suppose, if grade's the right word. Frankie Rowe we've all heard of course. Her dad was Dan Dwyer, the first fireman on scene at the crash site, if this is to be believed. I know there's some controversy and some question marks still over certain aspects of this story. And I'd like to just say, Martin, for the listeners out there and anyone, that I've never put myself forward as a UFO expert. I just wanted to make that distinction. I'm someone with an interest, a passion, obsession, whatever you want to call it, with the notion that this project was worth doing, but I've never put myself forward as a Roswell expert. So just bear with me if I'm not entirely up to speed on some of the facts. But in terms of my film and my witnesses, Frankie Rowe, daughter of Dan Dwyer, first fireman on scene, according to, well, certainly Don Schmidt and Tom Carey, and she held some of the fragments of the UFO in her own hands. That's her story. She was in the fire station on the day or around the day that it happened because she'd got an abscess on her tooth. She'd been to the dentist and she was waiting for her dad in the fire station. And the way she describes the story, and I'm sure people have heard this before, but the fireman, her dad, and a couple of the crew came back, had some of this material. You know, she basically describes what we now would think of as memory metal. And so, yeah, I guess she's kind of a first-hand witness, I suppose. And the story that her dad puts to her was that not only there were pieces on the ground, but, I mean, she does go into the aspect of seeing bodies, which, you know, I've got to say that's where I start to get more challenged with what happened, but that's her story.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about that in the second hour. We're going to take a break here because there's something that's always puzzled me about Roswell, and I'd like to discuss it with you. So hang in there, everyone. We're going to have a quick music break. And Simon, why don't you say goodbye to the people that only listened to the first hour?
Okay, well, it's nice to have been with you, and hopefully I've had something of interest to share with you guys. Thanks for sticking around.
Yep, okay, so hang in, everyone. All right, by the way, the music on the show is by, whoops, hold on. That happened before, and it's an iTunes thing. Sorry about that. Music on this show is provided by Carrie Lloyd Whitehouse, a fan over in Ireland. And one of the things that's always puzzled me on this Roswell thing, and I know you're saying you're not a Roswell expert, but is the two crash sites. There's always the second crash site is where they're saying the bodies were and all that. And there was some type of vehicle the size of a Volkswagen Bug. I've just heard these descriptions. Why were they so far apart? Stan Friedman thinks it was a collision. Other people say, no, it wasn't a collision. It was ejection of a pod, that crashed separately and, all that stuff. I mean, I don't think anyone's going to know the answer, but did you explore any of these topics?
Not in any great detail. I mean, we were there mainly for the witnesses. That was the focus of the film and the focus of my attention. We were there at the crash site, which was, I guess, what you'd call the first crash site. I'm not sure if it was the second one, the resting place. Don and the team did split up whilst we were there and did actually look at both sites. But we were mainly there, I think, at Site 1, which is where the impact occurred. I could be wrong. Don may tell me it's the opposite. But essentially, from what I gather, Don and Tom telling me, their point of view was it was about the speed that this thing was potentially travelling, and that's how this thing, went over large distances. But I've got to say that's not something I'm sure about.
Yeah. Okay, anyone listening live, you can jump over to our chat room at podcastufo.com. We're on the line right now with Simon Sharman from the UK. And you can also call in if you'd like. That's, if you're dialing overseas, it's 1-603-967-4030. If you're Skyping, just Marty Willis, MartyWillis. Sometimes I forget my name. So, excuse me. So after you you'd interviewed these. Well, let me ask you this: when you were interviewing these people, was there any new information?
Yeah, there were a couple of bits of information. I think the main one, or one of the main ones, was that Frankie Rowe had basically told or spoken with Don in the past about having her phone tapped, and this is something she'd never spoken about before. It was a few years ago now, but I mean, the film, you know, the interview she gives in the film explains the story in a lot better detail than I can here. Although I've just finished editing the film, put it out there. It's a funny thing, filmmaking. Sometimes once you've done it and wrapped it up, you're left with a massive space in your head, or certainly I am. It's in terms of some of the details. But in a nutshell, she describes how when she was having a phone service putting in her house, the engineer that came to do it found this kind of box on the line and basically went in and said, look, you've got something here that's, you know, shouldn't be here, and it looks like it's monitoring everything that goes in and comes out of your phone line. And she apparently handed this item over to Don for investigation. This is what she told me and what Don told me. I don't know what happened to that item. That's the only thing. I'm not sure. So in terms of evidence, I didn't physically have that in my hands. But so yeah, that was a new piece of information. And presuming it's true, then, I mean, that's kind of a strange fact, certainly for someone who apparently, you know, is making up this story, etc., which is obviously what people tried to say, that she just fabricated it.
Yeah, I was looking to see if I could find online real quickly the history of phone tapping. It doesn't appear. Well, okay, yeah, starting all the way back in 1928. It looks like. So yeah, I guess it's been around a while.
And sorry, I probably didn't describe that too well, but she was actually referring to much later than the 40s when this happened, is when she was in a particular house. Yeah, so this I think this happened maybe as late as the early 90s, somewhere around there. I'm not quite sure of the date she said now. In fact, I'm not sure she gave me the date, but I was certainly under the impression it was much later.
You know, the one thing that puzzles me a lot about the whole Roswell thing is why everyone was so quiet for 30 years until, you know, the whole thing started to break loose again about it happening. You know, I would think that more people would have been talking about it, but it seems to me that it was very quiet.
It's a good point. I'm not entirely sure how correct that point of view may be, insofar as, let's say these people weren't speaking a great deal about it, even if they were chatting about it amongst themselves. In all fairness, Martin, how would you or I know that they were or weren't back as far as, you know, even the 50s, the 60s, or the 70s? How would you even know? I mean, it seems to me that it's only the last few years where obviously now we've got, you know, complete and total coverage of news as we have it. But up till a few years ago, I think, I mean, what would the press were ignoring things anyway. So I'm not entirely sure that view stands up for me. I think it's quite possible that they were talking about it, but nobody was asking them, or nobody was interested.
Yeah, you make a very good point. I never really thought of it in that way. Or, you know, maybe no one was interested if someone did want to come forward. You know, I mean, there's that one story about the husband and wife in a grocery store, and he's reading the National Enquirer when the story broke. Unfortunately, it had to break in that. Roswell broke in that. And the widow of this man, you know, says, well, he told me everything, you know, after he saw the story. He said, well, if everyone's talking about it, here's my point. And I think he was involved also in the aircraft that transported the debris.
Yeah, I'm not sure who that would have been, but I mean, who's that researcher now? His name escapes me, but there's one chap who did a lot of research on making that connection between, you know, the CIA and the security services and the National Enquirer itself. And he makes a very good argument, a very strong argument.
Yes.
How that, actually, real stories are actually put out through the inquiry, just to help, help keep the obfuscation going.
Yeah, there was a connection between the CIA, former CIA agent actually bought the Inquirer.
That's right. Yeah. But, I don't know. And look, I don't want to sound like I'm grasping at straws, but my point is just because it's in the inquiry, does it make it a completely invalid story? Well, again, I'm not sure it does. Yes, of course, it brings it into question in a much more, in a harsher light, but I don't necessarily think it means that you just have to disregard it.
Hang on just 1 second. We're in the chat room. They're saying we're having a sound glitch. I just want to see if it's back. Which can happen occasionally on this show. Okay, it's back and we're good. All right. Well, that is interesting that I didn't know. I watched the trailer, but I wasn't aware that it was actually Roswell witnesses. And I think someone on the skeptical side said something like, "Oh yeah, there was all of a sudden there was a bunch of witnesses as soon as the story came out." Like, they were fabricating stories, and I don't think that's the case. To me, it doesn't make a lot of sense why people would do that.
No, if I can just say, from my point of view, as I said to you in the beginning, Martin, I never claimed to be a UFO expert, and the people in the field who do this research, and they make it their job and their full-time business to do it, and it's certainly not been my life's work to do it. What has been my life's work, or 20 years or so, is interviewing people on camera. Those people have ranged from, the most simple, straightforward of people, working people, through to pop stars, movie stars. I've even filmed an ex-Prime Minister of the UK in Number 10, so I've got quite a range of experience of putting people on camera and spending a lot of time with them. And I will say this, I didn't find any of the witnesses anything but absolutely genuine in their way towards me. I didn't think that any of them were fabricating or exaggerating anything. The one thing I did find was that, if I was trying to be very critical about it, was that, as you said, these people were all in their late 80s. Another chap, Ken, who's a new witness, second witness, who's in the film, actually the ex-brother-in-law of Frankie Rowe, actually. He was actually married to her sister in the past. When it came to comparing their stories, because essentially they were giving the same story but from different points of view, as he'd spoken to Frankie's dad before he died back in the day, there were some very slight discrepancies on how they would describe details. Now, you're probably going to follow up and ask me what those were exactly. And I'm sorry to say, without going through the old footage, I couldn't tell you exactly how it came over, but I do recall thinking, that's not quite how Frankie told me, or vice versa. However, what I couldn't deny, and this was for both Frankie and Ken, was their absolute integrity in terms of how they put the story over, how they came about the information, and what they believed. And in my mind, they absolutely 100% believe what they told me to be the case.
Mm-hmm.
And for what it's worth, I don't know what that's worth in real terms, but from my point of view, that added a great deal of weight to the whole argument.
I totally understand and respect that, because I have, in the interviewing that I've done face-to-face, you really do get a real feeling whether there's some BS coming over. And I actually did interview someone. I probably won't say who it is, but my BS meter was on full blast. But for the most part, people like Travis Walton, the two fellows that I interviewed about the Allagash case, I felt like there was strong sincerity in what they're saying. I didn't have any feeling at all like some of it could be fabricated in any type of way.
Yeah, and it's a powerful thing, isn't it, I think, when you're in the presence of that kind of very clear intention, seeming integrity, and when people have got nothing to gain, it's a bit of a cliche now that in the UFO subject, but these people don't have anything to gain. They really don't. Frankie Rose, she's like you say, she's not young. She has to drive all the way down. I don't know. She lived a little bit out of where we did the interviews. Same for Ken. He actually lived way out of Roswell. He had to drive quite a way. And wait around for us to set up and film, and he wasn't getting paid, and there's no gain for them to do this. Mm-hmm. It's hard to think that they're making this stuff up. And I know the skeptics always fall back to say, well, that's not proof of anything, and I agree with that. But when you've got many people pointing towards the same story who don't have a reason to make it up, and who individually don't know each other, then I don't know. You've got to ask the question.
Right. There's a message question up on the message board. After all of your research, what is your final opinion on the Roswell crash?
20 plus years I've been interested in this, and particularly Roswell, because that was obviously the most famous case even back then. The honest answer is I'm still not 100% certain of anything. That's the first thing to say. Mm-hmm. If I was a betting man, which I'm generally not, I would have to say that the evidence looks like something really extraordinary happened.
I agree. And, a lot of times, I mentioned earlier I have a skeptic next week, Michael Shermer, on. I'm really actually looking forward to that. He's someone that really, he really has his opinions on UFOs, really strong opinions on UFOs. So it should be an interesting show. But one of the things you hear, people like him say is, the reason they kept it secret, it was the Project Mogul, and on and on and on. And, again, I don't think it was a weather balloon. I think it was too extraordinary for them to pay so much attention to it. And there's also someone that I spoke with that one of the things I have always thought and have said a number of times is, how would the U.S. Army Air Force call something a crashed disc, or captured a disc, or captured a flying saucer? Why would they put that in type? Why would they put that out to the press if it was something different?
Yeah, I agree. And as much as I think, and I do enjoy speaking to skeptics, as I was actually described as a self-confessed believer in a write-up about the film in London, which isn't quite true, I've got to say. But taking that out, even speaking to skeptics, I think it's always good for the mind anyway. But taking that on board, why? Yeah, so I've lost my thread there, but I just don't really. There's no rationale in that, is there really? And I'm not quite sure what the skeptics would say to that either. In fact, I'm not sure what they say to that point, because, as you say, they put it out in type, and it was there for everyone to see, which is why, obviously, the cat got out of the bag in the first place. Well,
one of them that I spoke with said that, the reason they did that was because Project Mogul was real secretive, and they didn't want anyone to know about that, and everybody was talking about flying saucers, so they focused the attention on that. But why put anything out? If that's the case, they didn't have to put any type of press release out at all. There wasn't enough people that knew about it to warrant a press release. So, that's my argument on that, against that side of it.
Yeah, it seems fair enough. And we can't really imagine what it was like, I think, as kind of, as the world as it was then, as it is now. You've got to imagine, 47 and Roswell, it's quite, okay, it's not a small city even now, but when you think back to where it is, and certainly out there, even kind of the main roads quite often weren't even main roads out there, were they? So it was really a different world in some ways. So I just don't get it.
So you went out to the crash site. Now that is about 50, 60 miles or something like that outside of Roswell, right?
Yeah, it's quite a drive. It's northwest, I think, or northeast, one of the two. But yeah, it took a little while to get out there each day. Setting out at about 6 a.m. in the morning, you'd get there. Yeah, it's a good hour, maybe a bit longer than that. But yeah, it's quite a drive. I mean, I don't want to give too much away about the film, although I probably need to give more away than the trailer gives at the moment, because that gives literally nothing. In fact, it's definitely my next job to cut a new trailer. But we did actually get lost in the desert, quite literally. It's funny, Jaime Maussan was there by chance. Well, not by chance, but he was there at the same time. I didn't know he was going to be there. I'd not met him before then. And on the second day, without going into too much detail here, we basically got split from the main group, and we were lost for over an hour. And when I say lost, I mean really lost. I've got quite a good sense of direction. Travel quite a lot with work and whatnot. But we had no phone signal, and of course we were very smart not to have hard copy maps in the vehicle. And of course, we didn't know exactly where this location was.
You can see for it's big, wide open skies there.
Oh, it's horizon to horizon. It's those roads to nowhere, literally. So, it was a little hairy for a few minutes, but we weren't in any life-threatening danger, but we were definitely properly lost. And people, when you see the film, you see how it resolves. It's kind of funny looking back. I'm not sure it was so funny back then, but it all ended okay in the end.
Another thing that just occurred to me that I never thought about when it comes to Roswell is they've scanned the area over and over again where the crash site was and never found anything. And in my opinion, if it was just foil from a mogul balloon or some type of weather balloon, why would they be so careful in picking up every single little tiny scrap of it? Which no one ever finds anything.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we interviewed Fawn Fritz at the site itself. Fawn, as I'm sure you know, was the granddaughter of Mac Brazel. I never know how to pronounce his name. I think it's Brazel, isn't it? The rancher who found the wreckage. Yeah. And she describes how her dad told her that, they were walking shoulder to shoulder. And it wasn't just once, it was twice. They came out, literally scouring this whole area in there. I don't know how many men there were, but, she makes this point, they were literally walking in lines, and that's how her dad described it to her back in the day.
Yeah, that's really overkill if it was just something that was replaceable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it just doesn't add up. Even the skeptics have to accept the fact that it just doesn't add up, the amount of interest and as well as the changing story over the last, set of 60-odd years, how many times they've changed it. It just doesn't add up, does it, for a weather balloon? One thing I am certain of, actually, Martin, from all of this, is that it wasn't a weather balloon. Whatever happened in Roswell wasn't a weather balloon. I would bet my right arm on that.
Yeah. And when it comes to the bodies, I thought the one thing about that I know you said that was a little bit of a harder area for you, but one of the things I find really curious about when they talk about the bodies is that the Air Force in the 1990s, I think 97 or something like that, when there was that Roswell investigation, came out and said that those were crash dummies. And, of course, crash dummies had not been even invented until, I think it was 1952 or something like that.
Yeah, that's right, the 50s, yeah.
But the thing that I find the most curious about that whole statement is all they had to say was there were no bodies. There were, this does not make any sense. But they didn't say that. Instead, they try to explain it away, which I think is another curiosity.
I'd never thought of it like that. That's a really good point. Why not just flat out say it wasn't the case if they weren't there? And, why even go down the road of saying, well, actually, it wasn't those kinds of bodies, it was a different kind of body. Yeah, it's a good point. And I just think it's something else that just adds fuel to the fire for the possibility that it was something.
Okay, so your film is called Cosmic. Is it The Cosmic Whistleblowers?
No, Cosmic Whistleblowers.
Cosmic Whistleblowers.
Yeah,
And you're not exactly sure when that's actually hitting the screen.
Well, we're just negotiating distribution as we speak, which is I'm finding to be a lengthy and complicated process. But yeah, I'm hoping it will be certainly no later than early next year for the, maybe the US market. I'm not sure it would be any sooner than that. We are looking at television or video on demand, but we've yet to figure out how it breaks down. For me, I don't mind how that does happen. I just want as many people to see the film as possible, of course, because that's the whole point why I do it. But I'm not entirely sure which route it's going to take as yet. Although it does look like television could be a possibility. Although I've got to be honest with you, I didn't make this film with television in mind. I either thought it would be a purely an online film or potentially a small theatrical release and then online. Because it is feature length, actually. It is worth saying it's 75 minutes long. So this is not it's not a made-for-TV film. I really have to say that. And because I filmed it we haven't really covered it yet, and I know we'll probably go into it in some detail, but because filming began back in 2013 and it only finished earlier this year, over a 2-year period, there is a beginning, middle, and an end to this whole affair. So, when it comes to television documentaries, it's not really doesn't really sit so easily in there. There's a bit more to it that we can talk about a bit if you like.
Well, one of the things you were mentioning about distribution, of course we could talk about this off air, but I know Netflix is picking up a lot of this topic. And as a matter of fact, they have Stephen Greer's Sirius on there, which I highly do not recommend. Sorry, everyone.
Yeah.
But anyway, but they're posting a lot of this topic on Netflix, and that would be an amazing venue.
Yeah, no, and I certainly hope to be. I hope for it to be distributed on these channels: Netflix, Amazon Prime, or all of these other major platforms, possibly iTunes. It is all dependent upon the distribution deal, and there is a pecking order. So generally speaking, iTunes want first dibs. If they don't get first dibs, then they don't want it at all, etc. So you've got this whole thing to map out, and of course. You want to get it right. It's my first independent film outside of broadcasting. So it's, I just want to tread carefully for the next week or two just to make sure we get the right deal and make sure that we get the film out there. Because what I don't want to happen is that, the film doesn't go as far as it can, because I believe it's, I don't think there's a film out there like this that's been done before in terms of the level of, how can I put this, access that we had or I had to the investigators. Partly by chance, it was a real opportunity to actually put the spotlight a little bit on the investigators themselves. And I'm not entirely sure that there's been another film that's done that until this point. If there has, I'd be very interested to hear what it is, and certainly like to see it if any of your listeners knew of any. But generally, UFO docs are all about the evidence and the UFOs and the stories. Well, Whistleblowers turns into something a little different. And I've lost my thread now, Martin. I don't even know if you asked me a question, but yeah, I just think this new direction is something that maybe... Oh, yeah, I found myself. That's right. I think maybe it's time to do things a bit differently. And this is something I've learned from the film. I think ufology needs maybe a bit of a kick up the backside, if I'm honest. That's how I feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you hear that a lot. I'm actually going to be on a show next week where the guy is sort of a UFO skeptic, and he invited me on. And a saying that I've heard him say is the swamp needs to be drained in the UFO field.
So. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I put this trailer out online. It was more of a teaser, really. I don't know if any of your listeners or if you managed to see it yet, but it basically gives very little or nothing away. And within minutes of it going out, I was heavily criticised as being this is going to be another pro-UFO Roswell Dream Team production, etc., etc. It should be on the Sci-Fi Channel. And, you know, I made a couple of statements and then I thought I'm just going to withdraw, really, because it's not something I need to do. But I will say this. My film is not a pro-UFO investigator movie. By having said that, equally, it's not a debunking movie and the types of which we've seen, you know, certainly in the British press. I don't know if you get it so much in the US, but over here, the last few years, there's been a bit of a trend for, you know, these quietly dissing documentaries. So, you know, this kind of Louis Theroux style where you've got someone who's in your wake and is pretending to be a friend, but actually all he's doing is taking the mick the whole time. And I find this kind of filmmaking a bit sickening, to be honest. It's not something I want any part of. However, I think my point is there's a balance there's a line to walk with ufology, and it's not easy to walk it. I've got to say, Martin, the edit was very difficult. We were putting some very challenging positions with the film and with the narrative, with what was going on with the so-called Roswell slides, etc.
Can we just address that a little bit?
Yeah.
So you were filming this in the middle of the Roswell slides. Do I dare say debacle or situation? Fiasco. Yeah. So so you had to do some creative editing.
Only insofar as this story was unfolding as. In fact, it began unfolding before I went to Roswell in 2013. I'd heard of the slides. I'd actually been anonymously tipped off by someone who was interested in what I was doing with the film, and he'd asked me if I knew about the slides. At the time, I didn't. And I asked Don before I went out there, and he was very prickly about it. He wanted to know who told me and how I'd found out. Anyway, the long and short of it was, when I landed out in Roswell, it was Jaime Maussan who actually told me, without me even asking him, at the crash site on the second day I was there, about the slides in greater detail. So this story was already brewing back in 2013. So I just happened to be, you know, in the right place at the right time, the right place at the wrong time, whichever way you want to call it. And so off the back of that, I'd been having discussions with Don to say that, look, whatever's going on with these slides, whatever they are, obviously I need to try and cover what you're doing in the film. And that was actually largely the reason why this film took so long to make, because I knew this was going to be obviously a controversial part of the Roswell story, no doubt about that. I mean, I never for 1 second believed that there were going to be pictures of a dead alien flying around the planet. Let me just be clear of that one. But, you know, it's going to be an important part of the story, so I had to hold off to make sure we included that. And that's why it took so long, because as you know, that didn't resolve itself until May this year.
Yes, and I'm curious, you know, it's funny. I'm going to get a lot of trouble for saying this, but I promised my listening audience I wouldn't keep talking about that. But
it's my fault. I'm sorry. I started it.
Yeah, okay, I'll blame it on you. But one of the things I just wondered, has anyone been paying attention to any updates on people's stands as far as I know Don was kind of drifting back toward that it was a possibility of an alien. I don't know where he stands at this point. I haven't spoken to Don in quite a while. I know Jaime is standing strong, or has been, and I'm just wondering, is that still status quo as far as you know?
As far as I know, yes. I've not spoken to either of them for the last probably 2 months. I did have some Skype interviews with them for a part of the film, which, was probably about 2 months ago. And, I mean, that kind of feeds into, I think, where they were both at then. I'm not entirely sure where Don is on the whole slide situation myself now. The only thing I do know, and I'll just say this if we want to wrap this part up, but I will just say this for the listeners, by the way. It does become a large part of the film, and a part of the film that I think people will be very interested to see. You know, I was there in Mexico City filming the situation, not only front stage, but backstage. So I was there with Jaime, with Don, with Tom, both before and after the whole episode, getting their thoughts and seeing things unfold as they unfolded. And I've got to say, Martin, it was an absolutely fascinating few days for me to be there. And I think, you know, from the film's point of view, I think people will be very interested to see just how all that came about. Of course, after that, then you've got the work of the Roswell Slides Research Group, who I interviewed for the film shortly after, or as it was unfolding, actually, within, you know, on Skype, within the days of it all falling apart. So, you know, the film does cover. It does cover this aspect, this whole situation in some detail. And, you know, I'm sure I'm probably not making any friends with part of it in some way. But I will say this, I treated everybody as fairly as I could do the whole way through. And I mean that in terms of their right to reply, the editing that we did, and just my own point of view. Essentially, I just let people, you know, provide their own take on the whole situation, and I let people decide for themselves what they want to decide. But I've got to say, it was a tricky editorial task, which was challenging for a while. But I hope I got it right, and I think I did. But like I say, the cards fall where they fall, and people decide which side of the fence they sit on, you know, after the whole thing imploded.
Well, fair enough on that. We had more of a statement up on the message board saying that all they know is that you've interviewed witnesses. They don't know any more than that. Is there more you can add to what the show is about?
Sorry, in terms of what the film's about, I'm sorry?
About the documentary. All the person's saying, all we know is that you're interviewing people we don't know. So if you can get into some of the details, I know you don't want to spoil the movie for anyone, but...
No, it's a fair question. And can I just say, first of all, thanks for putting that question in, whoever that came from, or that statement. It's something I'm definitely looking to address in the very near future. I will be putting out a new trailer which will be much more indicative of the entire film, which, yes, does include the witnesses, of course, but the investigation... because in the last, as you'll know yourself, monitoring what's been going on in the last couple of years, you had both Bill Clinton and Obama on the Jimmy Kimmel Show. You had the John Podesta tweet. We had the statements from NASA about finding life. There's been a lot of things converging, I think, and these things are happening during this time. So as well as the witnesses and as well as the slides, I do... in fact, I did go to Washington specifically with the aim of chasing down John Podesta because I had a contact at the White House there, and I thought I may be able to get some time with him, even though he'd just left the White House when I got there. That didn't quite happen, unfortunately. So we don't get an interview with him in the film. But you know, I do investigate the more up-to-date political angle. So, for example, I do have Stephen Bassett. He's an interviewee. And we cover that aspect, the whole disclosure project, or the Paradigm Research Group's work specifically, as well as I try to, you know, obviously being a documentary filmmaker, you do try and get both sides of the argument. I did manage to track down the NASA chief historian for I think he was chief historian for 6 years. Stephen J. Dick lives just outside of D.C. Obviously, he had some really fascinating opinions on not just Roswell but on UFOs. Because my point was, you know, you've got someone here who's an astrobiologist. He looks at, you know, proving life off Earth. He put this symposium together of what they would do, what we would do as a planet should that day come, which I, for one, thought was interesting in itself. The fact that someone's even putting this symposium on, and he's getting religious people from around the world and whatnot. And I asked him outright, do you think it's possible that Roswell was a real event? And he answered me outright directly, and his answer wasn't in the negative.
Mm-hmm.
But now, that doesn't prove anything again as such. But, I tried to make this point, or in the film, I tried to draw the comparison that maybe the differences between ex-NASA historians or astrobiologists, astronomers, and ufologists actually aren't so different as they may think. They're just two sides of the same coin, but they just go at it in a different way, and that's something that I think comes out in the film.
Just one thing. I'm bringing this kind of up out of context, actually, but my sister and brother-in-law are here visiting here at my mountaintop house here in Maine. They currently live in Colorado, but my brother-in-law was at the Los Alamos labs for many years, scientist there. And so I asked him if he wanted to speak on the show and tonight, briefly. And and I said, I just want you to say your opinions on, UFOs. And was the topic brought up there? What did you hear about it there? And he goes, absolutely nothing. And he said, everyone's getting it confused with Alamogordo, if I'm saying that right. But anyway, or Area 51, he said. But he said, it's never, no one ever brings it up in Los Alamos. It's funny because you do hear that, you do hear about Los Alamos quite a bit.
Yeah. Would that be an answer you'd expect from him then? Is that what we'd expect him to say?
Well, a good something, and on the positive side, I thought was that he said, I said, well, what do you think about UFOs in general? And he said, it's possible. And I like hearing a person of science, actually have an open enough mind to say that.
I think, I think it's vital. I saw somebody quote or paraphrase the NASA statement earlier. The chief, I can't remember her name now, the chief engineer at NASA, who made this comment on, I don't know if she was talking about either Ceres or this star they found, this planet they found with too much light in the last couple of days. But this statement about how the last thing we should consider it is that it could be alien life. And then he put underneath this, and it's like, wow, you're a scientist, I mean, I really thought that made the point well, insofar as why can't you think like that? I don't get it. It just doesn't make sense to me. It's like there's an inherent preclusion in their thinking to think that, this is actually a likelihood. It's always, from the point of science, it always seems to be the point of unlikelihood that aliens are the case. Do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a process of ruling things out. I mean, that's the way it should be looked at instead of just completely pushed off of the table as far as a topic. They have to do their science to see what it is, and sometimes it could be a natural phenomenon of some kind that can't be explained. There seems to be a lot of that going on.
It just seems to me there's always a bent towards looking for alternative answers to the fact that it could be other living things. And that seems to me like a bias. I don't know, I'm not a scientist, but it doesn't seem to be a very balanced approach. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm with you there on that. So if you're listening live, you can pose a question for our guest. We have about 12 minutes or so left to the show. And so what other whistleblowing topics did you bring up as far as this, in the documentary?
Well, as I kind of made, I don't want to give the ending away, but I kind of make a statement on this towards the end of the film. And I will say this, Cosmic Whistleblowers, it's a big title, and I've got to be honest with you, it's not easy to live up to. To find these people, especially people who've already been found by other people, and some of which are already on record.
You came up with the title first, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I definitely did. I had high hopes.
Well, that's like, I don't know if you ever heard the Snakes on a Plane.
Yeah,
that actually came up. They came up with the title of the movie before they came up with the movie.
Yeah, that's about right. But, you know, it was a catchy title and it seemed to work. It seemed to say the message I wanted it to say. But, yeah, in terms of whistleblowing, I mean, you know, we all know that Roswell is what it is. And there isn't, in terms of evidence, you know, there isn't new evidence there to be discussed, although maybe Don and Tom may disagree with that. I think for me, maybe it's more about whistleblowing on the whistleblowers. Like I said earlier, it's a time for a change, I think, in some parts of ufology and the way we do things. The fact that, you know, some people were sat on this research, like, for example, with these slides for several years before anything happened, and then it all blew up very quickly. I don't agree with the way that all came about, and I don't think it helps the subject, and I don't think it helps people get to the truth. I think it's time for a change. So in terms of the whistleblowing, I think, for me, I think it's about looking at who's doing the work, how they're doing it, and I'll say, are they the right people?
A question up on the message board. What is your perspective on what an ET would look like?
Wow.
Your guess is as good as mine, right?
Yeah, I mean, really, come on.
This guy did an LOL after it, so
okay, fair enough. I mean, I don't know how read up your listener is there, but you know, I've spent a long time reading, you know, as many books as I can get my hands on this subject and people's experiences and accounts and whatnot. And you know, even if 0.0001% of them are to be believed, then I guess they can look pretty much like anything. There just seems to be so many different accounts. Apart from the obvious, you know, the grey types and whatever, there just seems to be so many different ways. But you know, who knows? I mean, I was talking to my girlfriend the other night. We were saying about how the planet sizes may be so different that, you know, we could be a planet of giants to them, and they could be a planet of giants to us. You know, we could be. You just, you know,
that's right. Gravity has to play a big role in evolution on a planet.
Yeah. I mean, we could be like insects, literally, or they could be like insects to us in some ways. You know, it's just, or a million things we can't think of. It's actually the things we can't think of, I think, that are more baffling because, you know, we're locked here, aren't we? We just don't know.
Yeah. Everything we know, everything and everyone we've ever known and talked about is all right here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a pretty humbling thought. But you know, I mean, I'm sure everybody agrees, or everybody probably thinks along these lines that, you know, there's just got to be so many out there. There's just got to be so many different beings out there, hasn't there?
Yeah.
And it's just a question of, the only question is, it's not whether they're out there. It's a question of whether they've ever been here. That's right. My only question.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. Since I started doing this show, I started having a lot of conversations with my son on the topic. Even, you know, he's more or less a skeptic, but he does believe me when I told him about my sighting. That is something that he does believe me, and it wasn't an amazing sighting, but it was. For those who haven't heard, you know, I just had a disc fly over me back in 2006. And it stopped. There was the thing that baffled me the most about the whole sighting was not even the object, was that it was making no sound and moving. You know, that's what baffled me the most. And then I heard so many other people talk about that. You know, that sparked my interest. But
wow,
in the conversations that my son and I have, you know, like, what are, you know, is someone having like somewhere else? Are they having the same struggles as humans have in everyday life? You know. Is there such thing as poverty, and is there such thing as all the things we are afflicted from in different ways? And, you know, is someone getting a brand new car or equivalent, you know, somewhere else? And the possibilities are so vast that there could be billions of species, you know, in the universe as vast as it is. We have no way of knowing, but. It's really something to if you really get into a thinking fest, then you can think about it.
Oh, it's an infinite rabbit hole, isn't it? I mean, you just once you start, there's no getting out. But for me, it's the most. I don't know. It'll always be the most fascinating subject that I can possibly think of. It's something that you can never ever get bored with, because it's always going to be a question, unless something happens that gives us a different kind of a sign in the next few decades. Then we're always going to want to know.
Well, even if, let's say tomorrow, all of a sudden we find some type of 100% sign of intelligent beings somewhere, well, there's still going to be the question of, okay, well, how many different types are there out there, and what are they? And there's going to be so many questions, even more questions the more we know, really.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I find interesting is when I started thinking about this subject about 20-odd years ago, you couldn't really have these conversations openly so much. You just couldn't. There was a definite massive giggle factor and mocking factor then. And I know it's still there today, but it's not there in the same way. People are more open, like you say, whether it's the scientists, whether it's, even, your son, they, maybe skeptical, and good for him. But to have this kind of open conversation, it was much less common back in the 80s. And that's one thing I'm very glad to have seen the last couple of decades, that there is a shift in the conversation and the attitude towards the subject.
A few months ago, I was down at Goddard Space Center down in Maryland with a guest, Ray Stanford, and we went in there and we sat with an engineer at NASA and talked to him, and he's totally into the subject, which is and he respects Ray and has been to Ray's house and looked at some of Ray's films and pictures. And so I was, and he's an older guy, real nice guy. So that really gave me some hope, to see someone openly interested in the subject in a position of science.
That's so good to hear. And, when you think about it, I'm sure there are actually many open-minded NASA engineers, astrophysicists, astrobiologists. I'm sure they're all out there. I'm absolutely sure of it. But, maybe they just, they speak, as you say there, on an individual basis. And obviously they've got to watch how they speak when they're doing it professionally. But, underneath, when the doors are closed and the curtains are drawn, then they can actually, speak their mind with close company. I think that gives me a bit of hope, like you say, because, as long as there are enough people out there that if there was something that they would maybe, push that idea that people should know. Because I do think, I do categorically believe that if there was something out there, a sign out there, that they absolutely would close it down before telling any of us. I'm absolutely sure of that.
Earlier on in the show, we had Alejandro Rojas on. He's from OpenMinds.tv, and he, the last number of weeks that he and I have been talking, he's telling me that the UK it has a real fascination now as far as the press goes in UFOs. Are you seeing a lot of that?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think the subject in general is, when I say the subject, I mean aliens, the idea of aliens, I think, as a notion, as a scientific fact. Yes, UFOs are coming into it. I'm not sure what he was speaking about specifically. I mean, I know the Daily Mail runs a lot of the sensationalist stuff here, which gets a lot, quite often, I think, too much interest because, in terms of the Daily Mail, what it can be, it's very exploitative in that way. But there is an interest, without a doubt. There's an increasing interest. It depends on what's going on. I think for me, there's more general interest in the subject and the issue of aliens than UFOs. That's what I would say.
Mm-hmm. Someone on the message board wants to know. I'm guessing it's like, what's your thoughts on ancient aliens or past, many years past on visitation?
Yeah, entirely open to that notion. Something I've looked at myself. I'm not talking about Ancient Aliens, the series. It's not something I really watch, I've got to say, so I've not got much opinion on that. But as an idea, whether it was the what was it, the West African tribe of the late 19th century, and they worshipped these, was it the Dogons? They came from the second Sirius B, which was only discovered in the 1960s, and they talked about this back over 150 years ago. Whether it's true or not, I don't know, but there are certain accounts across the planet that definitely point to some really interesting philosophies from older civilizations that seem to have either a serious interest or / fairly strong knowledge of things that, they shouldn't have, or we couldn't wonder how they had it. So, absolutely. We're quite a young planet, aren't we? As the universe goes. Mm-hmm. And, the next system along is like 1 billion years older than us. So, why not? Yeah, that's something that I will definitely bring up next week when I'm talking to Michael Shermer, is about, the fact that here we are, we're going as far out in space as we can, exploring as much as we can optically or other ways, and basically, can't you be open-minded enough to know that it's possible we're being visited? So we have to close the show now. It's been a real pleasure speaking to you. Yeah, no, thanks so much, Mark. It's been a great pleasure. It's actually gone really quickly. I was worried I wouldn't be able to manage to stay awake with the early hours I'm doing. But no, that's right. It's like 2 in the morning for you. Yeah, it's kind of late, but it's 3 actually. But no, it's been a great pleasure, Martin. I was really happy to come back. All right. Okay. Thanks so much. You're welcome. Take care. All right. You too. Thank you all for listening to the show. Next week we have starting out with Mark Rodegier and Leslie Kane, and then on to Michael Shermer. And I want to thank people for helping out with the show this evening. We have Keith for helping us with the live show. Peggy is helping us with the Facebook page. Remember to like us on Facebook for all the latest UFO news. I think we have 24,000 people on that page. And thank you so much, everyone. Keep your eyes to the sky, and we'll be talking to you next week.